What if the secret to overcoming life's biggest challenges lies in learning to embrace cycles of transformation, not just as a concept, but as a profound lived experience? Imagine turning ancient wisdom into a modern roadmap for growth, aligning your life and business with your true purpose. And in today's episode, we're diving into the journey of someone who has done exactly that, blending science, magic, and spirituality in order to help others unlock their potential and master their gifts. And welcome back, action takers, to the IDK WTF I Was Doing podcast. I am your host, David B., your accountability buddy, partner, and friend as we navigate the ups and downs of building a business. In here, we share real-world case studies of entrepreneurs who have transformed their lives and businesses by daring to take action. Today's guest is Michelle Hawk, an alchemist, shaman, master healer, and spiritual mentor. She began practicing shamanism in 2003 at just 15 years old, drawing from Hungarian and Celtic lineages as she mixes this with her background as a biologist and a deep reverence for life. All of this makes her uniquely equipped to guide others through a profound transformation. But how did she turn her passion for the unseen realms into a successful, soul-aligned business? And what lessons can her journey teach us about embracing the transformative cycles of life and entrepreneurship? Stay tuned as we explore Michelle's journey, and right after we thank our sponsors, we're going to uncover the universal truths she is using to change lives. You do not want to miss this.
How can a single book be worth $1.5 million? In a hidden corner of the world, a collection of unparalleled wisdom has been discovered. This book, and the story behind it, has the power to revolutionize your approach to success. Written nearly a century ago and lost to time, this book contains the foundational principles that have shaped the lives of the most successful people in history. Only a select few have had the chance to see it, but now you can too. This isn't just a book, it's a priceless masterpiece that holds the key to unlocking your potential. Are you curious? Then go to idkwtfpodcast.com/book or click the link in the show notes below to see the full story and find out why this book is considered a priceless treasure, as well as how it can influence your life forever. Again, check it out at idkwtfpodcast.com/book.
And welcome back, action takers. Once again, we are here with Michelle Hawk to give us some amazing advice on the transformational power of alchemy. And I'm really excited to have you on the show. So thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, David. I'm really happy to be here and share this with your audience.
Yeah. So we kind of heard a little bit of your formal bio, but why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got started into this and kind of where you came from?
Yeah, absolutely. I started studying and practicing shamanism when I was 15. So, what that means is I was very always attuned to the unseen realms. I was interested in magic and nature and energy and healing. And I was one of these, very magical kind of weirdo kids, as I feel like all kids really are. And many people, as we grow up, tend to get shut down in that. So they're told, oh, that's not real, or they're otherwise discouraged from this kind of magical, animistic worldview. Fortunately, I was not discouraged from that. I had very supportive parents who were encouraging me to read all the mythology I wanted to, and to go out and, collect rocks and make potions out of leaves in the backyard. So when I quite literally stumbled into my first shamanic workshop at age 15, it was one of those proverbial, clouds parting, light beaming down moments of everything makes sense, because I received a vocabulary and a context for what I already felt to be true and what I already knew to be true about the world. So from there, I continued my spiritual education. I took workshops and classes in a whole bunch of different things, and eventually going to study energy healing, and while simultaneously earning my degree in biology at university. So it was a very interesting path to walk of both science and spirituality simultaneously. And eventually leading me to study alchemy, which is very much a scientific and a spiritual practice. So I've been in business since 2009. I've been working with, I've gone through a lot of iterations of how I support clients in my practice since then. One of these Looking back at the beginning of my practice, oh my gosh, it's completely different from how I'm serving now. And I know that many entrepreneurs who are tuning into this can certainly relate to the transformations that we go through in our practice. Yeah. But for me, alchemy and shamanism are really the core lineages and modalities that I hold in my practice. So I mentor and train practitioners who are interested in adding alchemy and shamanic practices to their existing therapeutic skill set, whether they're medical providers in the Western medical field or naturopathic, Eastern medicine, or therapists, coaches, counselors, social workers, body workers, helpers and healer types who want to cultivate practical application of spiritual technology, or also non-practitioners who want this for their own healing journey. So working with trauma, working with inner child stuff, working with their soul purpose and alignment and connecting with those unseen realms and processing their spiritual awakening in the world.
Yeah. So that's an awesome story. What's really cool is like the support when you're young for, that's something that especially a lot of us 90s kids didn't get a lot of when it was like, hey, I want to go play in the mud and mix it with leaves. Like, I personally loved computers back then. And like, it was like, just stay away from those machines. They're never going to be anything. Right.
Wow.
So really cool you had that. Go ahead.
Oh, you feel vindicated now. You're like, look, they're everywhere.
Yeah, I was right. Little David was right. Yeah. But yeah, so it's really cool you had that. What was that? Do you remember what exactly that first workshop was that you took and kind of what it was like?
I do. It was a journey. It was a shamanic journey workshop, specifically working with lower realm guides, so animal guides, and then also higher realm guides, spirit guides. So it was 2 journeys. And again, this was my very first official foray into the realm of shamanic practice. So I didn't even know, the terminology of lower world, middle world, upper, I had no idea. And I just remember that everything that the teacher was saying, it's like it ignited. For every one thing I heard, it's like I remembered 10 more things. And I know a lot of people who have spiritual awakening experiences or shamanic awakening experiences have a very similar feeling of like, okay, I know this already. I remember this. And so it was, I remember that workshop so clearly. I think I even still have the journal that I had where I took all my notes from that workshop, and it's tucked away in my closet somewhere, but I definitely kept it. It was obviously very impactful.
Yeah. Yeah. What a pivotal moment in your life. One of those like core memories.
Yes.
So for some of our audience, they might not know exactly what you're talking about. So maybe can you define exactly what alchemy is, what shamanism is, and how they differ, and kind of how you bring them together?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so shamanism, since I started talking about that, is a broad term used to describe animistic, earth-based spiritual practice that is ubiquitous to indigenous people all over the earth. And so in the U.S., I live in the U.S. You're in the U.S. too, right? You're in Denver? Yeah, okay. Yeah. So here in the U.S. and the Western world, we kind of conflate shamanic practice with Native American people, and that's actually not true. Even though Native American are, some, and, of course, there's many, many different tribes, a group of indigenous people who do practice this broad umbrella term of shamanism. That's also true. We see this in people in South America and in Europe and all over Africa and Asia. It's everywhere. And so the shamanic lineages that I practice primarily come from what is now Hungary and the Celtic shamanic lineages. So I actually have been initiated in European shamanism. But I have also studied with Turtle Island indigenous teachers, meaning here from the United States, North America, and then also in South American lineages as well. So again, earth-based, animistic spiritual practice, meaning forming direct relationships with spirit side guides and spirit forces, channeling those spirit forces for the purpose of guidance, illumination, and healing, and working also with earth spirits, earth energy, in some cases, including plant medicine, like this, very kind of popular surgence of psychedelic plant medicine in the world. That's one tiny slice of the shamanic pie, people. It's very, very small. There's so much more to shamanism than that. Alchemy, in contrast, is also a spiritual practice, an animistic spiritual practice. And what I mean when I say animistic, animism is the belief in life in all things. So all things are alive, all things are connected through this animating life force. And alchemy is also a very ancient spiritual practice that originated, as people can best guess, in ancient Egypt and has spread throughout the world. There's a lot of evidence of, kind of Middle Eastern alchemists, and then it's spreading through Europe. And that's kind of where we have a lot of the famous in the Western world alchemists like Isaac Newton and Galileo were practicing alchemists. So alchemy is really unique because, as I said, it's both a spiritual practice and it's also a science. We have alchemy to thank for all of our modern science. You can look at like the root of the word alchemy is the same as chemistry. So looking at, where we got the periodic table from is from alchemists asking questions about what is this made of? What are the compositions of this? And breaking things down to understand their atomic structure.
Yeah, just one quick point on that, because it's so funny, and it's something. So a lot of people don't actually even know, but I run an astronomy channel that talks about like space stuff all the time.
Oh, cool.
And so I get a lot of people who feel that science is the end all be all, and they're like, science is everything, but they don't realize that everything that we have our modern science based off of is based off of ancient manuscripts that were just deciphered. And it's not like it was just invented by a bunch of old white men, 100 years ago. They were studying this stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's weird that it's been so forgotten and so like removed from the modern conversation.
Well, that's a really great point about what is science? Science is asking questions about life. Mm-hmm. And alchemy originally is, they were asking spiritual questions about life. Mm-hmm. And then it so happened there was this divergence. And I actually learned, I was looking at where did that diverge? And there was this very cool resource that I found talking about the divergence of where science and spirituality, where alchemy kind of split off, actually came from the alchemists themselves to protect and to kind of separate and allow these two different branches of investigation to blossom. And, they weren't always at odds with each other. They were actually very much two veins of inquiry into the same cosmic truths about what is life, what is the earth, who are we, what are we doing here, right? Again, These are all very, very scientific and very spiritual questions. So I really love that. I have, again, my degree in biology, my background in science, and also my background in spiritual studies. And for me, they're two ways of asking questions about the same cosmic truths.
Yeah, absolutely. And more, especially with quantum physics, it's coming back together because there's a lot we don't.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Speaking of being vindicated though, okay, when I was at university in the bio department, and at the time I was studying energy healing and consciousness practice, and all my pre-med classmates were like, over here, Michelle, talking about energy healing, having a role to play in modern medicine. Like, I don't know what you're thinking. And then of course now we see, meditation can help. And having, consciousness practices makes a huge difference in pain reduction and, cellular regeneration. Like, gee, weird.
Yeah. Well, those darn hippies were right.
But alchemy, so I realized I kind of got off track a little bit. So alchemy is very commonly known in pop culture as turning lead into gold or turning a base material into gold. But really what that speaks to is taking this base material, whether it's lead or whether it's like our own shadow, our own unprocessed egoic false self, and leading this through a process of transformation and transmutation into its most elevated enlightened form.
Awesome. So it's not just trying to find gold like we learned in high school, right? There's so much more to it. And I
gold within.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now that we just kind of talked about how a lot of what was known and was kind of intuitively known is now being scientifically proven. So why else do you think that the study of alchemy or even the acceptance of alchemy is so needed in the modern world?
I think that universal truths will always be true. And things that speak to, when I say universal truth, speaking to like the law of gravity, we're pretty darn sure that that's going to be consistent throughout all of, for the foreseeable future of history on Earth and moving forward. And yet we also have these laws of, the cycles of change. We have these laws of how energy naturally moves in the world. And we can observe some of this through, for example, in, our very observable immediate point of reference in nature, like the rising and the setting of the sun, and the cycle of day and night. And we have the waxing and waning of the moon, and we have the cycle of the seasons. So we have, and in planting, if any of you out there are gardeners or like grow houseplants, right? You know what it's like to like, okay, I'm going to plant this seed, and the day you plant the seed is not the same day that you harvest the seed. So we know that there's a natural process of the seed going through this destruction, like breaking open, sprouting this new structure. You need to tend it, you need to water it, and then you need to support it and help it grow in the best way. And then you can harvest, and then the remainder is composted back into soil. So this cycle of death and rebirth is one of these universal truths. Alchemy is based in this universal truth according to universal law that we see reflected in the world around us. And I feel like, ironically, the more easily available all this information becomes, in terms of like, you can go anywhere and look and find a book on alchemy in a metaphysical bookstore, or you can go like, Google, what is alchemy? And it'll tell you all these articles about, these ancient scientists and whatever, and it's led into gold. But the way that we actually experience the transformation that is talking about is by participating in it. And if we think about our ancient relations, all of our ancestors, all the ancient alchemists who were out there asking questions about life, they were observing the stars. They were observing the cycle of the seasons. They were asking those questions to understand, why does the sun rise here and move over and set this way? Why is the light of the moon changing? And now anyone can go watch a video from NASA and figure out like, okay, this is how this works. So we're actually very removed from this direct relationship with how energy naturally moves and how life works. It's really, alchemy is the roadmap to how transformation works. And so for anyone who is feeling stuck, anyone who's feeling, gosh, I'm looking around, I don't like my life. I feel like I was building this version of my life or my business or my relationships on some old version of myself that maybe wasn't really authentic, wasn't really true to who I am. And now I'm looking around, I feel stuck and I feel trapped and I don't know what to do, because we fear change because we don't understand it. People are so often, there's, a lot of stigma around making really drastic life changes. People in our lives get upset because they don't understand either. They get afraid. They're like, I don't recognize you anymore. You used to do this. We used to be best friends, and now you don't have time for me, right? So there's social pressure to stay the same. There's also, societal, cultural pressure to stay the same and not rock the boat, particularly for people who are socialized feminine. There's a lot of pressure to be very, people-pleasing and accommodating, etc. Thankfully, people are breaking out of that, less demure. And, but with all of this, there's this, and, when a lot of my clients come to me, there's this feeling of, I want to change and I don't know how, and I'm kind of flying blind in the dark. And so again, alchemy is rooted in these universal truths of how death and rebirth moves through all of nature, and how all of life abides by these cycles and abides by these mysteries. And when we know those mysteries, they become less intimidating. We're no longer afraid, or we might be afraid, but we can do it anyway. And we can make those changes in our lives. We can live in integrity, coming home to our true selves, and then build our life organically from that true self rather than from a false construct or projection.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And I really want to kind of reiterate what you said, because that was super powerful to me, because it makes really common sense when you hear it, but we so don't think about it, because information is so commonplace now. Like, we know how everything works, quote unquote. You can Google anything, especially people who are very science-minded are certain that this is how stuff works. But on the other end of that certainty of this is just the way it is, like you said, it removes us from participating in the natural cycle of it, because we know it logically, but it removes us from actually experiencing it. And so, like you said, that's where that fear comes from change, from growth, from becoming the next version of ourselves, is because we're not participating in the natural progression, the birth and death of like different cycles, which is really, really cool.
And the participation is where we transform, not from reading about it, not from watching a YouTube video, not from, it's from participating and coming into direct contact with these forces that exist beyond us.
Exactly. Yeah. And with anything, a lot of my clients too, they've read a bunch of books, they've listened to all the motivational tapes, but they haven't started their business yet. But my understanding is that you've kind of identified seven core stages of alchemy and how to identify where you are in that cycle. That is something I would like to hear. I think we're going to take a quick break. And then when we come back, I would love to really figure out how we can identify like which part of the alchemy cycle that we're maybe even stuck in.
Absolutely.
Are you drowning in tasks, feeling stuck and overwhelmed, or just plain frustrated with your business? Have you been spending hours each day with no real results and confused about exactly what to do next? Are you feeling a bit lonely because you don't quite know how to find the support you're looking for? Well, I understand how you're feeling because I went through this for years. I'm David B., and I'm here to help with the best solution to get you out of this funk. Now, Tony Robbins says to create the product you always wish you had. And really, I always yearned for a knowledgeable friend who I could message for answers, hacks, or ideas. But all I found were $1,000 video courses or gurus charging the hundreds for an hour of coaching, where they ended up just trying to sell me something else anyway. That's why I created my monthly unlimited teamwork sessions, to give you the support I wished I had at a fraction of the cost and exponentially more value than anything out there that's similar. Get started with me today and enjoy virtually unlimited access to my personal cell phone number every day with no contracts, no commitments, and you'll have hands-on support whenever you need it. You can work with me as your personal mentor, your assistant, or your accountability buddy, always just a message or a phone call away. Imagine not having to purchase another book, another online workshop, or some masterclass because you can just text me, David B., your buddy, who has been at the forefront of this industry for a decade. And because this is so personalized and it's dramatically less expensive than you'd ever expect, spots are very limited. So don't wait. Go to idkwtfpodcast.com/David B. and say yes to your success today. All right, and welcome back, everybody. So let's talk about these 7 stages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the 7 stages of alchemy. These are ancient principles. And there are different versions of this too. So to anyone who might go look up, well, what are the stages of alchemy? Sometimes they're listed as like 11 or 12 or, some other number. But the way that I have learned this and the way that I work with this and find the most natural inclination of this is as these 7 stages. Now, I'll walk you through this and I'm going to use the alchemical technical terms. Don't worry, just kind of let it wash in one ear and out the other, because if you want to learn more about this, I have a resource for you that I'll tell you about later. And so you don't have to take notes or anything, because this is, again, like ancient mystery school teachings that we're getting into here. So alchemy begins with the death phase. And there are the 7 stages of alchemy that are divided into 3 phases. There's the death phase, the purification phase, and rebirth. Now, in the death phase, we have 2 stages. And the first stage is called calcination. Calcination is associated with burning. It's associated with the element of fire, and it is the energy of the loss and destruction of physical structures. And what this means is we can think about this in our lives, or calcination type events in our lives might be losing a job, or losing a loved one, or going through a breakup, or having to move out of your home, or even cleaning out a closet. That can be a calcination type activity. It's any loss or destruction or dismantling of physical earthly structures. And again, as I mentioned, like, you can consciously choose to clean out your closet, or there might be, a horrific accident and that something's happened. So
Flood.
Exactly. A flood actually is the second one. So like a forest fire, right? Yeah. Don't jump ahead, David. Sorry. So, but yeah, some type of catastrophe, or like your house burns down or something. So we have, again, we're consciously engaging with this on one layer, but sometimes change happens. And so then, and this is true universally. So as you're listening, I'm going to invite you to look at, okay, for each of these stages that I'm describing, you can tune into, does this sound like what's happening in my life right now? Does this sound like where I might be right now? Or can I relate to instances of this happening in the past, either that felt like they were happening in my life, happening for me, or that I chose to go about, I chose to quit that job, I chose to end that relationship. So again, calcination is death through the loss of physical structures. And then our second stage is called dissolution. This is the flooding, okay? So just like the word dissolution sounds like dissolving, this is the death or loss of emotional and identity and energetic structures. This is where a lot of grief work happens. This is where we go through this, the dissolving of self, of this old version of our identity. Like I was mentioning earlier, how people kind of look around in their lives and they say, wow, I built this on some sort of false self. They're going through a dissolution process by breaking down that old version of their identity structure. And they're grieving any unhealed parts of themselves. This is also really associated with trauma work. So in the dissolution stage, we're doing a lot of emotional, energetic cleansing and clearing. And then we move into the purification phase. So again, the purification phase has 2 stages in it, the first of which is called separation. Now, the separation stage is where we start to work with a little more mental energy. We're starting to work with perspective and discernment. This is really about analysis. This is where we start to sort things out. Now, here's where I ask you to imagine, David, say for example, your house burns down and then a flood comes sweeping through. What's left?
Nothing.
Nothing. Well, it depends on how bad the fire was in the flood.
Yeah.
Right. So this is where in separation, we go in and we start sorting through that soggy, sludgy, charred mess. And we find, oh, this thing's totally gone. We got to throw it away. Oh, this thing actually seems like if I wash it, it'll be okay. Right. So we're sorting through the destruction of the death phase. We're sorting through what was released, what was cleared away. Here's the thing. When we enter the alchemical crucible, you enter unconditionally. You don't enter with like, okay, I'm only wanting to burn away these things. You need to surrender yourself completely, and you have no idea what is going to remain on the other side. That the guarantee of alchemy, the promise of alchemy, because it abides by universal law, because it abides by these universal truths, is that anything that is in integrity with universal truth will make it through to the other side. And anything that is not will be burned away. So when your house is, you burn your house and there's a flood, and then you find out, oh, there was this safe, this like fireproof safe that I never even knew about that was holed up in the wall of my house. Okay, cool. So you're using separation to apply perspective and discernment. This is where people often make lists of like, okay, I quit my job and like I grieve that aspect of my identity. Now, what do I want in my new job? Or I want to start a business. Let me make a pros and cons list. Let me do a values elicitation and figure out what I'm really excited about. This is a lot of that type of energy. And then we move into conjunction stage. This is the 4th stage, where we start to put things back together. This is about reformation, recombination. So we take the stuff that survived the fire and the flood, and then we take some new things. We're like, okay, I still have these old things. And, even though like I lost my relationship and I moved out of my house, I still have my job and I still have my loving friends and community. Okay, now I'm going to add in a new partner and a new job. Okay, I'm going to start putting my life back together, right? This is conjunction, but it's not the final product yet. So we're bringing new things in. We're like taking new steps to build a new structure. And then we enter the rebirth phase. Rebirth, it has 3 stages in it, and the first of which is called fermentation. This is the reanimation stage where we're saying, okay, this new structure, I'm going to connect it with my life force. I'm going to breathe life, connecting divine spirit to come and animate this life. And then, so this is where people start to like, okay, I'm settled into my new business. I'm feeling good. Now I'm really going to like turn on my inspiration and bring in that life force. I'm over the logistics of filling out all the paperwork. I've got my brick and mortar open. Okay, time to like bring in all the customers and let me fuel my joy and let this business come to life. Then we move into the distillation stage. And this is all about purifying the essence. So just like in chemical distillation, there's the process of, if anybody knows about distillation, there's the process of like evaporation and condensing over and over and over again to create a very concentrated, pure. And so the same is true energetically of like, okay, you opened your new business and you opened your doors wide, and now you're refining. Now you're saying, you know what? I actually don't really want to work with that kind of person. I want to work with this kind of person. I want to niche and specialize myself this way. I'm crystallizing and purifying my purpose to this very particular focus. I'm getting very clear, and it's very radiant. It's very like true to the essence of who I am. And then our very final stage is called coagulation. This is the stage of actualization and completion, where we're living in the full radiance that we are, having gone through this stage, but then we prepare to go through it again.
Okay. So that's amazing. And what jumps out to me, it really is the same cycle as building a business, right? And unfortunately, a lot of people have to start from the death phase before they're motivated enough to go through the rest of the stages and actually grow.
Well, you have to start with the death phase. That's the whole thing. You know, it actually doesn't work if you don't start with the death phase.
Would you say that some death phases can be more intense than others?
Yes.
One thing that I've found to be true is that if the world gives us an opportunity and we kind of miss that opportunity, or it gives us rather a lesson, and if we don't learn that lesson, then it gets worse the next time, and then it gets worse the next time. And so like each time you don't pay attention to the death, it gets worse until
I like to say it gets louder, like
louder,
turning up the
volume.
volume. It's like, because if someone's whispering to you to say like, hey, you don't like this, ready to make a change, and you ignore it, and then they're tapping you on the shoulder, hey, now's the time to quit, and then you still don't listen, eventually they're going to be screaming at you and smacking you on the head.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I see this like I can see it in clients. I've seen it in my own life personally, where it's like, wow, I really wish I had listened the first time, right? And it's hard for me to watch other people go through it, you know, but I realize that they have to, you know, because you can't, like you said, it has to start from that place before you can go through the rest of them. And I think that's one thing a lot of coaches kind of miss when they're trying to help their clients go forward, is that they try and start them at a level that they're not at, and then it doesn't work, so it fails. You kind of have to let the client get to that death phase and recognize it, and then build back.
You are absolutely right, David. And I want to tell you, like, one of the biggest mistakes and the biggest, you know, like things missing that I see in people who are doing transformational work, whether they're business coaches or healers or transformational work, people generally start what they think transformation is at the separation stage. They start with the analysis. Okay. They start with, okay, think about what you want, think about what you like, what you don't like, versus, and they kind of skip or they sweep under the rug the death part. But then what happens? To let it go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's scary to let it go. But then the other piece is, if you don't actually put to bed and like fully close those doors, those shadow patterns or those choices, like people wonder why, like, gosh, why do I keep dating the same jerk over and over again, just through different people? Or why do I keep, you know, seeking out the same boss who I kind of hate? Well, it's because you never actually went through that death phase to release that part of your identity that was calling that in. And this is where, again, like, it's crucially important. So you must start with death. This is where, again, we compost leaf matter to make fertile soil, and then we plant the seeds in it. Yeah. Like, you have to have the death before the rebirth can happen, because if you're jumping to the end of the cycle, there's going to be stuff that's going to come back and bite you in the ass later.
Always, every time. Yep. And again, and harder and harder.
And louder and louder, yeah.
Louder and louder. So what kind of other ways could you apply this to maybe an entrepreneurial landscape?
Yeah, so many. You know, here's the other piece about, like, any universal truth is, it is universally applicable. So in entrepreneurial, to an entrepreneurial landscape, I can apply this, like, to myself in my own process of my entrepreneurial journey, but then also supporting my clients, some of whom are entrepreneurs, some of whom are not. But looking at, as, you know, the ways that I find people get really stuck, or the ways that I find people really need this, is when they're afraid to make big changes, when they're, you know, feeling intimidated or feeling like people are going to respond negatively by making a pivot in their business, whether they're even just taking that initial leap of becoming an entrepreneur and leaving a job or conventional employment, there's a lot of uncertainty and fear and old identity stuff. I have one very long-term client of mine who has worked in academia for her entire career. And she went to grad school. She worked so hard to earn her degree, and she's a university professor. And she really doesn't want to be a university professor anymore. She is ready to make that leap. And a lot of what we talk about is, what we're working through, and she's made tremendous strides, is releasing almost the sunk costs of, gosh, I used to want that so badly. I worked so hard. I spent so much money on my education and so much time and so many years. And I know people listening to this can relate to that, of the thing that you used to want, or the thing that you thought you wanted, that you worked so hard to get. It's really staggering to look around and realize, you know what, I actually don't want that, or I don't want it anymore.
Yeah.
So then when we work with alchemy, we can then apply these transformational principles to, okay, what do I need to release? What do I need to let go of? What part of myself do I need to let die so that this new part of myself that is ready for something else can have the space and the time and the attention that it needs and deserves in order to grow and thrive and blossom. And then that can spread into all these other areas of my life and my business. So so many areas. And of course, more than that too, for more established entrepreneurs going through these revisioning cycles. Like I myself have been through so many of those in my work. And we go through this process of, you know what, it's okay to let this go. Here's how I can support myself in perhaps even grieving something that I used to, that I do really love, that might not be working. Letting go of passion projects. That's a big one.
Yeah, it's hard too.
Yeah.
Well, now, actually, my understanding is that, so you don't just work with entrepreneurial clients, you actually teach people how to be transformative healers themselves.
I have a 200-hour alchemy practitioner training that I have developed and that I teach. And I have about 50-50. My clients are practitioners or non-practitioners. So those who are practitioners who go through this course, then they're learning tools and techniques that they're putting into their work and sharing with their clients as well.
And so what does it kind of look like when someone's coming in to work with you and go through your certification?
So this certification is for people who already have a foundational level of spiritual practice. I have found that people who are brand new to the path, it's a little much for them. So you got to have been on the path at least a little bit. So having already some training in some type of energy healing modality, consciousness practice, having some sort of personal practice, having cultivated your intuition at least somewhat. So it's for, moderate to advanced people. But then when we're entering into this, it is simultaneously a crucible of your own transformation. So everyone who is participating in this is going through these really deep processes, but you're also learning practical skills and techniques, but in alchemical philosophy and then the practical application of that in movement practices, ritual practices, ceremonial work, meditation work, healing practices, and then of course all of these wonderful suites of alchemical tools. So much. And then it's a year-long apprenticeship, so a very, very deep dive. It includes in-person retreats. It's all very rooted in experiential learning. Because as we were talking about at the very beginning of the episode, you don't experience transformation by watching a video about transformation. You watch the video about transformation to learn how to open yourself to have that direct experience with the sacred, with life, with the mysteries, which changes you.
Exactly. That's awesome. Well, that's really, really cool. So, you've gone through your own personal journey. You've worked with many others. You've created a certification course to really help grow and spread the message and the love and the transformative health to the world, which is wonderful. And it's really cool. You've been able to create an entire business out of it, and that's what a lot of the people in our action taker community really want to do, whether it is through something spiritual, whether it is through, something personal development, or maybe they even have just kind of a hobby that they love doing. Going from something you're passionate about and something that you love and turning it into something that can sustain your life isn't necessarily the easiest thing. Can you give me an example of maybe a time where, just kind of like the name of this podcast, you just had no idea what the F you were doing? That
would be most of the beginning of my business, and probably even most of the middle of my business. So I mentioned that I've been in business since 2009. I started my business not actually intending to be an entrepreneur. I started my business because and at the time I wasn't working with people, I was working with animals. I was working with animal healing and I was doing animal communication, so animal psychic telepathy work. And I loved it. I loved it so much. I love working with animals. It was really fun for me. I found it very sweet and meaningful. And somehow people, I don't honestly even really remember. I think it was like through my energy healing work that I was doing. And then people found out that I did it and they told their friends. And so I would get emails and phone calls like, hey, I'm so-and-so's friend. Can you do a session for my dog? And so it was purely through referrals that people were asking me to work for their animals and then asking to pay me. So I was like, okay, sure. I guess you can pay me. I guess I'll, and my mom said, oh, if you want to like take payments, you can set up an LLC or you set up your business. So my mom was the one actually who like told me to go set up a business entity so that I could receive money and have a place for it to go. And so I started my business and just kind of made up numbers. I was like, I guess I can charge like $20 or $40 or whatever. And people kept referring me. People kept sharing how great my work was with other people. And then, but I was like, okay, sure, I guess I can do this with animals, but I really don't want to work with people. But then people started asking me, can you do a session for me? You helped my horse so much. Like my horse isn't in pain anymore. I have insomnia. I really want to feel that and feel good. So I was like, okay, fine. And so I started working with people. And then people started asking me, can you teach me how to do what you do? And I was really resistant. I was like, I don't really want to work with people. No, thank you. Okay, fine. So that continued for several years, honestly, in my business of I had some resistance or some idea of what I thought I wanted to do. And it was very much fueled by people asking me to offer the next step, to offer the next thing. And eventually I recognized that pattern after several years. It took an embarrassingly long time. And I realized, wow, the thing that I have resistance to is the thing that people end up asking me for. What is that about? So then I went through my own transformational process of looking at my own blockages, my blockages to receiving money for something that I just really love to do. You mentioned, David, in like people in your community, they have these passion projects, or they have this, this soul calling or this purpose that lights them up. And I know so many purpose-led entrepreneurs usually go through some kind of blockage about receiving money for the thing that they just want to do and want to help people and help the world.
Absolutely.
Very, very common. I definitely went through that for a long time. And I support my clients as they go through that too. And it is super, super important that all of our purpose-led people out there in the world get very comfortable receiving abundant financial compensation for their higher service and their hard work, because this is what is going to make the world a better place for everybody. So people, get good with getting paid, please.
And the number one thing that I always say is the only thing that can really fight all the corruption in this world, whether it's government, whether it's corporate corruption, is more heart-centered people running heart-centered businesses, doing healthy work for their community and earning more money doing it. And so seeing people like you who can just do it with their energy, with their ancient teachings is absolutely amazing. And the last question I do like to ask everyone is, you've gone through the hard part. So you had no idea what you were doing. You did something anyway. You've built it into a big business. We're here in 2024. What is, if I could wave a magic wand and take away one pain point from your current business right now, what would that thing be? If I could just kind of reach in, pluck and fix it, and it's just magically fixed, what would you like to have fixed in your business?
I would like to not ever feel obligated to engage with social media again. I don't do well with it. Occasionally I'll go through fits of inspiration where it's like, okay, I'm going to post on Instagram every day. And I get really excited about it. And then I go through that cycle of, like being tripped up by the algorithms and just, why did that video go viral? And that one didn't. Like, this one's so much better. It makes no sense. And it's this, just like you said, I've come to terms with the people who own the platforms. They have no interest in actually supporting organic, heart-centered creators who are challenging the systems that they built.
Exactly. They suppress it dramatically. Yeah.
Exactly. So I do engage with social media. Again, I have social media. So if y'all are watching this, it's not the best way to find me. Better to go actually to my website because I work a lot more with email than I do with Instagram. But if you find me on Instagram, like I think the last time I posted, but I would love to, if I'm ever inspired to engage with social media, that's great. But I hate that feeling of obligation about it because it's a system that I fundamentally disagree with and I dislike. And I wish I never had to deal with it again. And I guess I don't, honestly. I mean, that's a choice. Like, I don't have to. Yeah. I much prefer, far prefer to engage with platforms like yours, David, and come have a real conversation with a real person like you, where you are in your heart-centered business and you're helping people who are here living their purpose. Like, that's what excites me.
Oh, I absolutely love it. And I really appreciate you being here, taking the time, because we all have a choice on what we can do with any moment of our day. And you chose to hang out with me and hang out with a community of action takers who are going to love this message and take away some really, really good messages from what you had. Because going from death to building back up to essentially that rebirth and that growth is the journey that we all go through, and identifying the key parts of it. Whenever you can name something, it makes it more understandable. So being able to understand where you're at in that process, I think is huge. And if I'm not mistaken, you have something that can help our community with that, right?
I do. Yeah. Thank you, David. I mean, like you just said, if you can name a thing, it makes it much more accessible. So like I was giving you all the names of all the alchemical stages, and I told you, don't worry, I've got you. I have a free guide to the cycle of alchemy that you can download from my website. The link will be in the show notes, so you can go check that out. And this will help you learn more about the stages of alchemy. I shared the barely scratched the surface version, y'all. This is like, I teach a 200-hour training that spans a year, and I already have like years 2 and 3 curriculum in mind. Like, this is the very beginning. So if you want to know more, please go download that guide. And in it, I give a description of each of the stages, but I also give areas where people tend to get stuck, which I kind of didn't really get into today. So if you are feeling stuck in your own cycle of transformation, you can go read those descriptions and see like, okay, does this feel like where I'm at? Is this an energy that, I'm feeling stagnant like that right now? And then for each stage, there are supportive practices to help engage with that energy and move that energy and help you shift to the next stage. So I invite you to go check that out. And of course, if you're interested in connecting with me, you can also do that through my website.
Perfect. Well, I'm sure you're going to get a flood of people jumping in to find out more and to go through that assessment of the 7 stages. Thanks so much, Michelle, for being here. Thank you, Action Takers, for listening to another episode. And stay tuned. We'll be back next week. And everyone, have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
So let's break down what we just listened to, because the journey of Michelle Hawk took her from being a child with a wild imagination who eventually began exploring realms others might dismiss. And as she ventured into shamanism at just age 15, she took on the challenge of merging science and spirituality and ultimately transformed her passion into a thriving business. Along the way, Michelle faced resistance, both from herself and societal norms, but stayed true to her path, consistently innovating and empowering others through her alchemy, training, and practice. So pay attention, because Michelle's story reminds us that transformation often begins where we least expect it, in the fires of discomfort, loss, and uncertainty. So ask yourself, what part of your life feels ready to evolve? Are you resisting your own transformation out of fear? Michelle demonstrates that leaning into the process, even when it's daunting, can lead to breakthroughs you never imagined. So what's holding you back from fully embracing your own alchemical process? Take Michelle's advice to heart. Understand exactly where you are in your journey, identify the blocks keeping you stuck, and give yourself permission to let go of what no longer serves you. If Michelle's approach resonates, consider exploring her 7-stage alchemy guide. Sometimes naming where you are is the first step towards progress. And remember, this podcast is here to help you find your footing one step at a time, with inspiring case studies and actionable lessons. We here are a community of action takers, not afraid to confront the death phases in our lives and emerge stronger, wiser, and more fulfilled. So whether you're starting a business, navigating a personal transformation, or just trying to figure out your next step, You are not alone. Let Michelle's journey be a reminder that even the most challenging paths can lead to incredible growth. And even if you don't know what the F you're doing, just keep doing something anyway.